Welcome to Barnyard Language. We are Caite and Arlene, an Iowa sheep farmer and an Ontario dairy farmer with 6 kids, 2 husbands, and a whole lot of chaos between us. So kick off your boots, reheat your coffee, and join us for some Barnyard Language, honest talk about running farms and raising families.
In case your kids haven't already learned all the swears from being in the barn, it might be a good idea to put on some headphones or turn down the volume. While many of our guests are professionals, they aren't your professionals. If you need personalized advice, consult your people. So today we have a special guest host for our first anniversary episode. Caite, can you believe that we're already a year into Barnyard Language?
It seems like so much longer, Arlene, but also no time at all. So
kind of like kids, right? When you say, I can't believe how fast they're going, and yet the days themselves are...
The days are long, but the years are short.
Yeah, that's also true in podcasting, is it? Okay.
Yep, I think so.
Yeah. So for our first anniversary episode, we have a special guest who's also a former guest. We brought her back. So Wendy Johnson from Joya Food Farm is back on the podcast, and she's going to interview us for a change. But before we turn things back over to Wendy, could you remind us and our listeners, what are you growing?
So we are a direct-to-market or direct-to-consumer farm. We grow and raise lots of different things, but organic grains, pastures, and the sheep, lamb, beef, chickens, ducks, chickens for meat and eggs, ducks for meat and eggs, and pigs. And we do a lot of small grains, oats, rye. We're trying some kernza this year, done some millet, and organic corn, soybeans, and I really enjoy grazing. We do some custom grazing here as well.
That's a lot of different things. And you're also growing one farm kid, right? Remind us how old she is.
One farm kid, thank you. Yep. Thanks for reminding me. I sometimes forget about that one.
She's around.
I shouldn't laugh, but I've forgotten to pick her up from school before. Things like that happens once in a while.
It definitely does. You've got a lot of other things on your plate. So for this episode, we asked for input from our listeners on our social media accounts. And so Wendy will actually be asking us some of the questions that we got from all of you. So Wendy, you're up.
So I am so happy to have been asked to ask the questions to these wonderful women here. And so these are some great questions that we're going to be asking them today. So the first one is, for me, who is not a farmer, and these are the words of people who have put in questions. So it's not me as in me, but people who have brought in questions. So for me, who is not a farmer in any sense of the word, could you clarify any specialized verbiage you remember using? What is silage? I'm sure I can Google it, but I also don't recall others.
So I'm looking at this question and realizing that probably in lots of our episodes, we have words that people don't necessarily know, but they're just so common to us as farmers that we don't even think about clarifying. So silage, or corn silage in our context on a dairy farm, is a fermented corn product basically that cows eat. So you chop up the stalks and the cobs and everything, and it all gets mixed up together, and then it gets either put in a silo or a plastic bag where the air is removed or reduced so that that product ferments, kind of like a pickle for cows. So that's corn silage. And then people also make baleage, which is a similar product, which is where you cut hay.
That's what we were making last week when we wrapped bales.
So same with us. Yeah, same with us. We do make hay, so either in bales or chopped fresh, and then same thing, you can put it in a silo or wrap it in plastic and then it ferments. But maybe this is a good reminder to us that when we're doing heavy farming episodes that we clarify some of our words, because even when we have different people from different commodities, we don't always understand the words that they're talking about depending on what their crop or specific livestock is. So thank you for reminding us that we should ask for definitions or provide them sometimes.
Did you have anything to add, Caite, to that?
Not really, but I did see, I went to Honduras a number of years ago and saw down there, they're encouraging folks to make corn silage, or I guess it's probably not corn silage, to ensile vegetative matter in 50-gallon plastic drums, and they pack it down and then seal it with mud. So it does the same thing, but I thought it was cool to see it on such a different scale than what we normally see it here. I guess it's like a 50-gallon silo instead of a big tall thing. So
Yeah, like a big crock.
yeah, yeah, like a sauerkraut crock. I tend to call it kraut for cows. So, you know.
I find the word ensile an interesting one. You know, you have the word silage and silo, and the verb ensile, which I have not used in many, many years. I think it's a kind of a cool word. How come we don't use it for, like, we use fermentation for food, but ensiling for livestock feed?
I don't know how I feel about saying that I'm going to go home and ensile some pickles. I go ensile some pickles.
Oh, all right. So next question. What surprised you the most, good or bad, from the podcast this year?
I'm going to say mine is really good. And what has surprised me in the best way is how easily connected I have felt, and I'm sure Caite has felt the same way with each person that we have interviewed through the course of the year. I mean, most of them, some of them we have met before, but a lot of them are strangers. And yet all of our interviews have felt really authentic and genuine, and people have really opened up to us and to our listeners in ways that I didn't necessarily expect. And I do feel like, you know, if I was to go to any of their provinces or states and, you know, send them a message and say I was going to be nearby, that I could stop in at their farms, or we could meet up for coffee, or that we really have formed genuine connections with people this year. And I know that for Caite and I, that was one of our main goals, was to really create community within parents and within agriculture. So that's been the best kind of surprise.
So that's a fair warning to anyone we've dealt with, that if we come near you, we're going to show up at your house. So just a heads up on that.
We will give you a bit of notice. I might give you more notice than Caite.
Probably. I think for myself, the worst part is realizing how disorganized I am. Arlene is totally the brains behind this operation, and also the beauty. So I told Jim this morning that I'm pretty sure I'm just the brawn of this show, for whatever that counts for. For me, I think the best part has been realizing how universal so many things are, that especially, you know, as a farm parent, things can feel so isolating, and to have the opportunity to reach out and realize how common and universal so many of these things, for better or worse, are, has been really good. And to hear the connection that we're making with folks, and to feel like we're building that community, has been really nice.
Those are beautiful answers. And I forgot to mention before, or say to you both, happy anniversary. This is a really exciting episode. So I guess in general, a question that I have for you is, how do you feel after, you know, a year of being in the podcast, how, and the creation of it, from the very first podcast to this, to now, how do you feel it's grown or expanded your mind, or, and all the followers that you have?
I know I feel like when we started out, I didn't know what kind of a response we would get, or, you know, how hard it might be to do things like get guests, or, you know, basically convince people to talk to us, and what might come out of that. And this is kind of links back to that surprise part, but also, you know, I am proud of the range of people who have agreed to talk to us, and what we've been able to put out. And I feel like it's only the tip of the iceberg in terms of the kinds of topics that we want to cover, but I feel like we have really shown what types of issues are relevant to farm parents. And I hope that we can, I'm proud of what we've done so far. So I hope that we can just continue along the same lines as what we've already been doing.
For myself, I'm really enjoying how much easier it's gotten, since I feel more comfortable with just chatting with our guests rather than like feeling like it has to be super structured. And, like we're not on NPR. Nobody's paying us to do this. Like we can chill a little bit about some of how professional it sounds in favor of connecting with people. And I've really been enjoying that. And if anybody really has a problem with our sound quality, I hope you actually let us know, because I don't want to be like, I'm fine with making a terrible product. But there's a lot of folks in the podcasting arena who get awfully wrapped up in technical aspects and then don't put any of that energy into the content. And I would rather put more of our heart and soul into what we're making rather than how we're making it, I guess.
And I think, we talk about it almost every time. We're on rural internet, and so are most of our guests. So
yeah,
the sound quality is going to be as good as the infrastructure that we've got to work with.
Exactly. I'm glad mine hasn't cut out yet. Knock on wood. All right, next question. Thanks for answering that. What 3 agriculturally related skills would you tell a beginner to learn first? That's a good one.
Ooh, I feel like that is so commodity specific. Agriculture is so broad. Like it totally depends what you're wanting to grow or raise. So I guess in general, and this one is one I don't even really have, I would say tractor driving skills is probably a pretty good basic one. And I have very little skills in that department. So I'm not saying that that's something that I know how to do well, but I think that's a good general one. This isn't specific to agriculture, but I think doing your research and asking questions and not being afraid to not know the answers is always a good skill. And number 3, I guess based on this week's chicken losses at my place, maybe learning how to reinforce and make sure you provide good infrastructure and housing for whatever animals you have would probably be a good one too. And maybe I haven't been doing that very well either because we've lost a few chickens, but that happens too. Caite, what are your thoughts on that one?
I was going to say my first one would be learn how to ask questions and ask for help, because folks seem to get real stuck on that one. My second one would be learning how to read a soil map or learning how to know what kind of soil you have, because pretty much anything you're going to grow is either going to grow in the soil or on the soil. And knowing what you're dealing with is a huge step there. And my third one would be learning how to kill stuff, because when you're in the point of needing to be able to put down an animal that's suffering, needing to be able to deal with the predator problem, whatever, that's not the time to realize that you don't have a good way to achieve what needs to be done, or learning that you're not comfortable with it. And that is something you need to know about, or you need to stick with vegetables, and so, which is a totally fine thing. But one of the things I was not prepared for as a livestock farmer is how often I would end up having to kill things. Livestock predators, whatever. It's not like it's a common occurrence, but it's more than I anticipated.
Yeah, I guess I hadn't thought about it that way, but it's definitely something you have to be prepared for, right?
Yeah,
because
and
it's going to happen.
It's really something you want to be comfortable with before you have to do it, because I've had to go to other people's farms and help them put animals down, which I'm happy to do because it needs to be done, but it would be a lot better if they were able to do it themselves. It's not something you want to have taking longer than is necessary. And also, to be honest, I don't pay the vet to come out and do it now, because I can do it easier and faster for a lot less money. Pets are
You must be a
matter.
good
Most of them are standing pretty still, so that helps. But yeah, I think that's most of it. And this next question is just
Can I tell a quick story about something totally related to that? So when Johnny and I first moved back to Iowa and we started farming, his dad gave him a shotgun and some other kind of revolver. Okay, so and he's a city boy, so he's never actually shot a gun before. But his dad used to shoot, do birding, like kill birds, pheasant hunt. Anyway, so he gave him here, son, you're gonna need these. You live on a farm. And so he never shot anything before. In our first year, we had a rabid raccoon. I don't know. It probably had distemper, but it was out during the day. It was kind of walking really drunk. It needed to be put out of its misery. It was eventually going to really suffer and die. So neither of us have any experience with shooting anything. And so he took out his shotgun. And he's like, oh yeah, I can do this, And this poor raccoon, he was just acting really funny and terrible. I mean, it just was really sick. And he just stood there for Johnny. Johnny pointed the shotgun at him. And it's almost like he had his hands up, like, kill me now, take me out of my suffering. And Johnny shot the shotgun and he completely missed. And so Johnny tries again and shoots, totally misses, but it was just a terrible, like, I can't believe that we are doing this, and he was like, come on, I gotta get this raccoon out of its suffering, but it won't die. And so with the third one, finally, he might have missed another one, but it was like the third or fourth. He finally got it, took it out of its misery. But it was just kind of funny, but kind of sad. And so it was an interesting experience for both of us. We've now learned that a shotgun is not appropriate for a small raccoon in a barnyard. And so we've upgraded. But that was a good story. I mean, it was a funny story at the time. I wanted to mention two things. One, Arlene, you mentioned tractors earlier in your answer. Would you also say that driving a stick shift is probably a skill that a beginner should learn? I know that as I've taught some beginners here on our farm and interns, they don't have that skill, and a lot of our tractors have stick shifts.
Yeah, that's an easier first step if you don't actually have a tractor yet.
Yeah.
I think too, Wendy, I'm going to add a fourth skill here, is knowing when somebody's trying to fuck you over and being prepared to call them out on it. Especially for women, I think we can deal with a lot of people who know better than us and are going to help the little lady out. And it's very good to have people you trust to give you good advice. And it is very good to be able to tell anybody else to fuck right off, because
in agriculture and in life, right, Caite?
Entirely true. There's enough honest people out there to deal with that it's not worth wasting your time with the rest of them. So that's
a good one. That's even hard for me yet to do.
Yeah, it's definitely one that takes practice and is still hard even years into it. But I feel like maybe if we encourage more folks to do it from the start, it'll help.
And one other thing you said, Caite, one of your answers was that soil maps, reading soil maps and learning what different soils can do what. But in connection with that, the kind of the soil food connection, understanding, the soil and the nutritional qualities of the food that grows in that soil would be something I'd add on to your skill. That connection is really an important one to think about as you start a farm. So, all right, a listener said it's this kind of a story and a question in one. So they would like to know, quote, currently expecting my fourth because I know Arlene has 4. Did it ever feel like you were playing with fire while expecting your fourth? My 3rd, I was nervous for throwing off the balance, but in this pregnancy, I'm constantly worried that I've tempted fate. I have 3 healthy kids, and I just can't escape the feeling that something is going to be wrong with this baby, or it's going to change our life so much, exclamation point, question mark, exclamation point. A 4th means that I need a new vehicle. It throws balance out again, crowds our bedrooms, makes farm safety a bigger concern. With 4 kids, 5 and under. So maybe I'm just nervous about that. But I just can't escape the feeling of impending doom. I'm sure this applies to all with multiple children, but this time it's overwhelming. Am I alone in this feeling?
Definitely not. You're not alone in that feeling. I will say I did not have 4 under 5, so you are definitely in a different scenario than I am. My kids were more spread apart for sure, but we did have a bigger gap between our first 3 and our last. And yeah, I guess I had a lot of those similar worries. You know, we had 3 that were a little bit closer together, but just didn't feel like our family was quite complete. So, but that, you know, the thought about and the discussions around having a 4th took us a little longer to come to that decision. So, I mean, I think every time you add a new person to your life, especially when it comes in the form of a newborn, I mean, it's going to change everything, right? So it, you know, it will throw off the balance and you know, divide your time more. But I think, like all kids, right, it also brings, you know, more love and all the good things that come along with having another person in your family. So I get the anxiety for sure, but I guess I don't have any advice necessarily other than to say that, yeah, you're not alone, and I think it's probably going to be okay. And I guess you're entering minivan territory, so welcome to the club.
How about you, Caite?
I don't have 4. I only have
Well,
2.
between 1 and 2, did you have some of those
Yeah,
feelings?
between 1 and 2.
I
Yeah.
think the biggest blessing for us from going from 1 to 2 is that it took 4 years for the first one, and the kids are 16 months apart. So honestly, it was unexpected that they are that close. And so I didn't really have any time to think about it because I thought we were going to have a couple years to worry about having a second one, and we didn't. So I think the best thing when you're adding more kids is to be entirely too busy to worry about any of it. I'll stand behind that, actually. Just,
And I mean, if this person already has 3 under 5, then they're definitely busy.
I've been told by someone who's got, I want to say 6 under 11, that once you have 3, it really doesn't matter how many you have. And since she's also from a really big family, I trust that she's, you know, correct about that. That at some point it just doesn't matter, you know.
Because you already have no extra time in your life.
Yeah.
So
yeah, you're already driving a minivan. You're already doing a million loads of laundry. Like, what's one more, you know? So there's that.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that, Caite, too, is I think it's the 3 is that magic number, and then after 3, it's just what's another, and then what's another, and then what's another. Like in the last year, I've met families that had 8, and some had 8 under the age of 11, and which I don't even know how that's possible. I guess it is possible. And then another family that has 8, and then another family that has 10. And I think just after 3, at least what they said, it's just easy. So I
Not
think 3
easy.
is like a magic number.
let's not say easy.
Wrong word, yeah. Not easy, but maybe easier, less stressful.
I think
Yeah.
less intimidating,
I
maybe.
think
You're in a different universe maybe there.
Yeah, you know, I think I know I found for after 3 myself, not that I wanted more than 4, that was definitely enough for me. But yeah, you've got so many kind of systems in place and you're already outnumbered that, yeah, that maybe 4 didn't feel as hard, but I definitely can't see doubling my number.
I think
that would push me over the edge.
Arlene, I think it is chicken math. Because, you know, like you get 2 or 3 chickens and you're like, wow, I have so many chickens, lots of chickens. And then you're like, oh, well, these chickens are real cute. And then I got, you know, a couple more chickens. And before you know it, you have 100 of the damn things. And I feel like kids are basically the same way. Like, you know, it seemed like a fun hobby at the time. And then before you know it, you got 8 of them. That's how it happens. You know, I don't know. Sometimes I wish that we had like 10 because my kids are a lot of fun and they're cute. And then I think about what dealing with two different personalities in two kids is like, and what having 10 kids with 10 personalities would be like. And oh, it makes my head hurt just thinking about it. So
Yeah, I feel like sometimes the physical care of kids maybe gets easier when you have more, but I feel like the emotional care of kids gets more complicated, especially as they get older. Because there's a
So,
lot of different
Arlene, I gotta
personalities.
ask you.
Yeah.
So when you get upset at your kids, like, or one of your kids, do you ever, and you're distracted or something, do you ever like say all the other kids' names and the dog's before you actually get to that kid's name
Oh,
to
definitely.
say?
Yes. Yeah. They are always mixed up. And I mean, we have intentionally 4 different first initials, like the families that name all their kids with the same first, like the Duggar situation where it's all the same first initial. Like I would never be able to keep them straight then. And I knew that about myself because my daughter and my sister have the same first initial and their names are not that similar, but whenever I've been around both of them at the same time, I mix up their names for days. So yeah, even with different first initials, I'm always calling them the wrong name.
in your defense,
Whether I'm
Arlene,
upset or not. What was that,
yeah,
Katie?
I only have 2 and I call them by the wrong name. But I've
Yeah.
noticed that my kids frequently, when they're distracted, will either call one of us, mommy or daddy, the wrong one, or
Mhm.
when they get home from school, they will call me teacher because
Yeah.
that's what they call everyone at school. And
Yes,
so
and I'm sure
it's-
teachers get called mom or dad all the time too.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
Oh, all right. Next question. Have either of you honestly been able to re-listen to your own episodes? I find it so hard to listen to my own voice. Oh, I hear that too. And have you had to practice any techniques for style or enunciation, or does it just come together? And what are your pro tips for dry throat or coughing fits during recording? Great
I
question.
I do listen to each of our episodes, and Katie's the one who does all the editing, which is phenomenal because I don't know how to do that stuff. And so she is our editor. So I always really look forward to listening to our episodes. One, because I'm interested to see if she cut things out or how things kind of came together, and also because I feel like in the interview itself, I sometimes forget what I said or what other people said, or sometimes you're thinking ahead to the next question, and like I really do try and listen to what everyone's saying, but there's also other thoughts in your brain all the time too. So yeah, I don't love listening to my own voice, but I'm getting used to it. And I kind of listen to the podcast almost like, oh, this is cool. This is a good podcast. And it's like, oh, that's me. I sometimes forget that I'm actually listening to myself. And I have not practiced any techniques for style or enunciation. So I don't know if it is coming together or if I guess you guys can tell us whether we have any style or enunciation techniques that are working, because this is just how I talk. And we record on Zoom. So my only pro tip for dry throat or coughing is using the mute button and just pushing through it.
I will say the best feeling I've had yet podcasting was I have podcasts playing pretty much 24/7 or audiobooks or something. And I was driving the other day and listening to this podcast and thinking about how interesting it was. And then I realized that it was our podcast, because it just flips through random episodes. And I was like, that's such a good feeling to feel like I'm connecting as a listener with our own content. I will say about listening to my own voice that I said something in a Facebook chat the other day about that I don't do TikToks because I hate the sound of my own voice. And someone pointed out that we do a podcast. It was like, yeah, I know. I still haven't gotten past something about having to see myself and listen to myself it's too much. I just haven't gotten there.
Yeah, so we won't be doing live episodes putting them on YouTube or anything.
Maybe eventually, but
although if you're in our Patreon, we have been recording lately our weekly updates with just Katie and I and putting them on the Patreon page. So if you want to see us talk and do all that stuff and see our faces at the same time, you can. And there's also lots of messing up because that's where it happens.
And my pro tip for the dry throat and coughing is to always go pee before your episode and then bring a drink with you. The going pee doesn't really help with the coughing, but it does help with the being able to record a whole episode without having to run out of the room
I was
after you
wondering
drink
what
all
the
the water.
connection was.
Well, Arlene, having kids can be hard on your pelvic floor. So
True
just gonna go
that.
ahead and say it.
Said that you guys should do a bloopers something like of your guests on a social media post or something like that. I'm sure you have had lots of different situations in your podcasts where maybe you edited out something that maybe wasn't so good to be on there, or maybe you left it in, and I just thought it'd be a funny thing to do. Maybe have an episode about it or put it on your social media.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Can you recall any that kind of stand out to you that were pretty funny, like funny situations, funny answers from your guests?
Mine isn't a guest one. Oh, and someone's whippersnipping right outside my window, so this is perfect.
Doing what, Arlene?
oh,
What are they doing?
Oh, I don't know what you call it. Whippersnipping.
That's way better than what we call it.
What do you call it?
Yeah.
Weed whacking or string trimming?
Okay, yeah, that.
I like that.
And the tool is called a whippersnipper.
Yeah, me too.
That's amazing.
So I will
Snipping.
say, Caite and I sat down to do our weekly update last week or 2 weeks ago, and we both started off and realized what we were going to say were things that we weren't ready to share publicly yet. So it was like, oh, no, I can't say that. And then she went to start and she did the same thing. So it took us like 3 or 4 tries to actually get started on our update because we're like, no, that's not for the public yet. No, I can't say that. So, I mean, we are trying to be authentic with you guys, but sometimes, protecting other people's privacy infringes on what we want to say.
I don't even remember what it was that I was not going to say. So
we can't
who
talk
knows?
about it.
Yeah.
You don't have any bloopers that you can remember, Caite?
How many times did we record that first episode, Arlene?
Oh, maybe 4.
Yeah, it was rough.
Everyone says in podcasting, you just have to start. So, I mean, we started.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't.
Here we are.
And then we started again. Yeah.
I think the best part about podcasting versus like live radio is that you can just edit it out. And I think it helps our guests be more comfortable too when we can say, if you say something stupid, we can cut it. Like it's not, nobody will know until we get on our anniversary episode and talk about all the stupid shit you've said.
Yeah. But really, Wendy, most of the flub ups have been ours. I would say that I can't really remember any of our guests saying anything that was like, that we had to cut too much of. Yeah, it's usually us.
Yeah.
But that's fine. We can edit ourselves.
It's usually me. I very rarely edit anything Arlene says. I edit out a lot of what I say.
Because you're too hard on yourself.
Or because otherwise it's just me saying, I forgot what I was going to say a lot.
Well, okay, yeah, we can scrap those ones.
Yeah. All right.
All right, so this question kind of goes along with that. Which part of podcasting is easier, harder, and more fun than you expected?
All right, so I covered some of this, so I'll try and make this one a little shorter. Easier, I would say getting guests, because I thought we would get a lot more no's. I mean, we have gotten no's, but a lot of people we ask have said yes, which is fantastic. Harder, I would say I've been struggling more with the social media part and the promotion and the marketing side, which we're looking into getting some help on. So we've got someone who's going to come and give us some support on that side of things. But trying to let people know what we're doing is a whole other side of the podcast that I hadn't really thought as much about. And more fun. I don't know if it's more fun than I expected, but I really like talking to Caite all the time. So that's pretty fun.
Thanks. Arlene really does make this whole process a lot easier, which is really nice. And as far as harder, we've had, sometimes there's guests that aren't as fast to connect with on a deeper level, I think. And that's really hard because you know that if you can find the right way to connect with them, you'll have a really great conversation. But sometimes forging that connection can be difficult. And because we talk to a lot of folks where we have a really fast connection, I think when we don't have it, it's, A, I want a good interview, and B, I want them to enjoy it. Like, I don't want them to be done and be like, oh my God, that was the worst thing I've ever done in my life. I sound like an idiot. These people are idiots. Like, I don't want anybody to hate it. And the part that's been more fun, I think, is just when we get to connect with people. I'd say the other part that's harder is I'm learning to leave the podcasting social media groups, because I'm realizing that our numbers look different than a lot of people's, because there's a tremendous amount of podcasts out there that are about how to make money. And I think maybe if we promised people that they would make like insane amounts of money if they listen to our podcast, probably we'd have more listeners. But we're a farming podcast, so you're screwed and you're never going to make any money anyway. Well, hopefully we can help you with something else. But see, and I lost my train of thought. So I'm just going to edit that out too. Someday you'll get an unedited episode and you'll see what you're really missing.
So I got to ask, do you two talk outside of the podcast, like regularly? And then do you ever meet? Do you meet? Like, I know this is a 1-year anniversary, but like, have you met in person prior to you discovering, hey, let's make a podcast together? I like you, kind of thing.
Yeah, so we've only actually met in person once, but we talk on, through a messaging app daily, multiple times a day, usually.
If we missed a day earlier this week, Arlene, it was really weird. Like, I wanted to message you just to point out that you hadn't
24 hours has passed.
And then I was like,
yeah.
That seems weird to just like.
I noticed though, don't worry, I noticed. Yeah, so the one time we actually met, I was going to Dairy Expo in Wisconsin, in Madison, with my husband, and Caite and I had connected on a online parenting group, and it was for farmers and ranchers. So I'd sent a message to that group seeing if anybody from the community, the online community, was going to be at Expo, and nobody was, but Caite said that she was not all that far from Madison, and she said, you can come to the farm or we can meet. So my husband was very entrenched in watching every single cow show the whole time we were there, and I was not as interested in watching all of them. So we did a meetup halfway at a cheese shop in a little town in Wisconsin. So yeah, that's actually the only time we've ever met, which I think is about three and a half years ago or so. The boy child was just a little guy. And yeah, so that's actually our only in-person meeting ever, although we, are bouncing around ideas for actually seeing each other in person again someday.
I have hopefully basically just invited my entire family to go visit Arlene next year. So we're working on it. Something about how she lives in Canada, and Canada is apparently a much larger place than I really understood it to be, which I mean makes sense because it's like the same size widthwise as the US is. But something about only having 9 provinces makes it seem smaller.
10. Fuck, 10 provinces and 3 territories.
Okay, well, anyway, Canada's
I just don't want you to get your math wrong.
Smaller. Now I'm really wondering about the quality of my public
They're
school
all
education.
like bigger than the state of Texas.
Yeah,
almost.
Yeah. And I actually, I'll be honest, I didn't realize the Midwest was as far from where I am either, because we mentioned this on the podcast before, but Caite asked the one time, how far is Thunder Bay from you, which is a city which is within my same province, because she was probably just looking at Google Maps thinking, okay, like we could meet like halfway. And I was like, oh, it looks like about a 16-hour drive from where I am.
Oh my gosh.
As far as I can tell, everything is 16 hours from Arlene's house.
Pretty much.
Because isn't Prince Edward Island also 16 hours from your place?
No, I think it's a bit further.
Yeah, it's like everything is 16 hours away. I don't know.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Well, have either of you imagined what your reunion would look like? Like, are you going to embrace each other? Like, are you going to like run at each other?
Leap into each other's arms.
I think it'll be one of those like movie montage slow runs, but it'll actually just be Hugh and Jim, like embracing manfully their.
I'm picturing Caitie's kids arriving at my door and letting themselves in.
Oh, they would raid your
And-
kitchen for snacks so fast. My kids have no chill
yeah.
at all.
Yeah,
Yep.
and they'll probably get lost on the way. So we'll be like talking on the phone or something, getting her to the farm. But yeah, I'm a hugger, so I don't know if Caite is, but
Special occasions, but I think like once every 4
Special
years, I can
occasions.
probably be a hugger.
all right, yeah,
You know?
I'll get
Yeah.
one.
Good luck getting a boy child to sit still on your lap now, though.
Yeah, he was much smaller the last time.
Yeah, he was what, 6 months old? He was a little
think
tiny
so,
tater
yeah.
tot. Oh, it was so cute. Okay.
He's
Anyway,
a mover. That's
he-
true. And they do love their snacks. So
they
be
do love their
prepared, Arlene.
snacks. Yeah. Yep.
Oh. Okay. So what what are some of your favorite podcasts to listen to when you're not making your own? And this listener asked, limit it to 5.
Actually, I added the limit to 5 because I know that Caite and I are both
Oh, you did.
avid podcast listeners, and that we would both put way too many on. So I'm gonna say One Bad Mother, because I like the podcast, and that's actually the community through which Caite and I met. So that is a parenting podcast. Another one of my current favorites is Shag Married Annoyed, which is 2 British comedians who are married to each other, and it's just like both rude and funny and hilarious all the time. It always makes me laugh. I'm a big fan of not like heavy content necessarily, but like really good conversations with people. So I like Terrible, Thanks for Asking, which is about people going through hard stuff. And it's so hard to narrow it down. Stop Podcasting Yourself, which is a Canadian comedy podcast. That's one of my favorites. And this is a bit of a confession, but I am a Bachelor and Bachelorette watcher. I don't know if Caite knows that about me. So I actually listen to several different Bachelor content podcasts. I'm looking up the name of my favorite one. I just listened to it this morning, and now I'm embarrassed that I don't know the name of it. It is called, you're gonna have to edit this. It used to be called Here to Make Friends, and then they switched it. Anyway, I will figure that out. Yeah, it's a Bachelor recap podcast, and it's on the feminist side. So they talk about the problematic parts of reality TV, but I still love it. Caitie's looking at me weird. She didn't know I was a Bachelorette watcher.
No, I did not. And
I'm still thinking of the whippersnapping.
The whippersnappering is happening.
Yeah, sorry. I'll put mine on mute. I'll mute while you do yours.
All right. So I just had to open my podcast library so I could go through. One of my favorites is How I Built This with Guy Raz. He talks to entrepreneurs who've started different businesses. So like he's talked to size to big business owner at this point, and always really insightful interviews about how they got started. I also really like Home Cooking with Samin Nosrat, who's a chef and cookbook author. She pretty much got me through the pandemic. Her laugh is basically everything that is right in the world. She also has a Netflix show. Ologies with Alie Ward. She talks to people who study various things. So like she had an episode with someone who studies opossums for a living. She's had a watchmaker on and just all sorts of different things, but she's as nerdily enthusiastic about things as you can possibly be. And I love it because I love seeing folks embrace things they're passionate about. And The Best of Both Worlds with Sarah Hart Unger, who we've had on the show, and Laura Vanderkam, is about balancing career and family, which I really enjoy. And let's see, I'm going through the whole list because there's a lot of them. It's tough to choose. I'm going to go with LeVar Burton Reads because LeVar Burton. That's it. That's all you need to know. I think that's 5, right?
I think so. I found the name. Love to see it. That's my favorite Bachelor content. in case you start watching reality TV. I don't think Katie's going to, but that's okay.
Did you all get into Shittown?
Yes, I
Did
definitely
you-
listened to that one.
Did you?
I
Yeah.
don't think so.
Oh, it's amazing. That'll keep you, if you have a very long drive, that will keep you entertained for many, many hours.
I'm adding it right now.
It's kind of an older one, isn't it, Arlene?
Yeah, yeah.
It's like an
Oh.
oldie but goodie.
I didn't realize that that was the one that is abbreviated as S-Town. Yes, I did listen to it. I'm apparently very out of the loop on these things.
Well, it was a while ago. We can't remember all of them.
I will say that the part that really got me about Ologies was she did a 2-part special about bats and bat conservation. And at this point, I'll just listen to anything she does because bats are the way to my heart.
All right. I also really like Ologies with Alie Ward. It's a really good one. So thanks for bringing that one up.
She's like my bucket list interview to have on this show. If anyone has any
Oh, yeah.
connections, I mean, something about how she's like got her own TV show or whatever, and like this big podcast and all this. I'm not quite sure how we're going to make that connection, but I'm determined.
So I have long hours in the tractors because because of combining and planting and all other drilling, all over stuff. And you kind of get tired of listening to I do. I get tired of listening to farm podcasts, and it sounds like you do too. None of these really that you have all listed are really farm related, right? So I think we're all on the same page here. But there's a podcast, I don't know if you like history, but there's a guy, his podcast is History on Fire. And he's so into, the way he talks about history and these stories, he gets so into it. And it really enwraps you in these stories, and it makes history fun. And I can't remember his name. He's from Italy. He's Italian, so he speaks with this Italian accent, which makes it even more engaging and interesting to listen to. So that's one of my favorites that I like to when I have a lot of time in a cab.
Looking it up
History.
right.
All right.
I was also looking it up now. Sorry. I also really like the sort of, supernatural podcasts or true crime, but I found that I primarily like historic true crime because a lot of the more current stuff feels very exploitative and gross. And I don't like that. I especially don't like the ones where they joke about it, but the ones that are more historic cases feel more okay than or ones where it's like embezzlement, Ponzi schemes, that sort of things.
I will say too that I have found a ton of kids podcasts that we have really enjoyed as a family, because sometimes it's hard for us to agree on what music we're going to listen to in the car, and sometimes that can lead to some conflict. But podcasts have been a good way for us to both learn stuff and to have something funny on in the background. Oh, Katie, a good one that your kids would probably be ready for now is called This Podcast Has Fleas. It was a short run, but it's like hosted by a dog and a cat, and they are just so funny. And it's great for adults too.
We'll have to check it out.
It's called This Podcast Has Fleas.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're just going to do a just recommend podcast to each other for the last part of this episode.
Yeah.
We should, like we said, that's why I tried to limit it to 5. But,
I know.
How about this one? All right, we're going to move on.
Okay, moving on. Yes. What is the most surprising thing you learned about the other? And I'd like to add to that. What is one surprising thing about yourself you'd want your listeners to know about you or not know about you? But now I put you on the spot.
The most surprising thing I've learned about Katie, I think I'm constantly surprised, and she's going to try and turn this around into a negative, but I genuinely see it as the most positive thing, that I never know you know, we have kind of a script, but I never know what kind of question she's going to come out with. And yet it's always something that either breaks the ice with a guest or makes them feel more comfortable, or is something that I never would have thought of. But I just love how her brain works and the way that the way she thinks. And that's always
You mean like our
surprising.
pickles and NASCAR discussion with Katie Haynes?
Yeah.
There was a lot of talk about pickles and NASCAR, and it was
Yeah.
good.
A surprising thing about myself. This one is hard because I don't think I'm all that surprising, I guess. The one thing, and I maybe have said it before, I can't remember if I have, but I mean, we've got a lot of episodes in, so people probably don't remember. The one thing that's probably a bit surprising is that when I grew up, I swore I would not be a farmer, that I had no interest in being part of agriculture, that I wanted to do anything, but I was never going to marry a farmer for sure. And then, yeah, that didn't turn out the way I thought it was going to. So I guess that's kind of surprising, but this is where I was supposed to be, I think.
I wish you could see Katie's face right now as you were answering that.
I think the most surprising thing I've learned about Arlene, and I don't know that it was that much of a surprise to me, but I feel like it should be pointed out to our listeners, besides the whole bachelorette situation, which I'm
Yeah,
actually not that surprised by, I guess, is how lucky you would be to have Arlene by your side if you needed someone to kick your ass and cheer you on at the same time. I think Arlene may have a second career in the future as like some sort of home visitor post-birth, or like
I would love that job.
Rehab or something. Like, I feel like Arlene would have been a great rehab therapist because she's got a very good balance of ass kicking and encouraging hand holding. And I think that anyone who is in need of that would be very lucky
to
have her
thanks.
around.
Aw. I feel a hug coming on now.
Oh, yay.
I'm going to get at least one, Wendy.
There you go.
I know.
I think one thing that people might find surprising about me is that I still frequently am, but much less than I used to be. Dealt with a lot of self-doubt and putting myself down and not standing up for myself, and however else you want to put that. And honestly, mostly the process of doing fertility treatments and then having 2 kids and then having a cancer diagnosis and all of that back to back pretty much destroyed that for me. You get real good at advocating for yourself real quick in situations like that. And I'm really proud of that about myself. And Arlene, I don't think what you said about how my brain works is a negative at all. I'm trying to frame it as an origin story about how I ended up here instead of a negative thing.
Well, that's really great. Hallelujah for that. I both admire both of you so much, and I really enjoy your podcasts, and I just think the world of you both. And it's been really great getting to know you, Arlene, through the podcast. Katie, I've have a little history with, but
that sounds like we were like in a fight club together or something. We have a history.
Well, when I eventually make it to Iowa, I'll definitely be stopping by, Wendy.
Oh yeah, or we'll meet you over. We're not 16 hours away from Katie, so we can make the drive.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, next up, what skills have you learned from farming have helped you in the rest of your life?
I will say that I am someone who likes predictability for sure. I like to know what's happening when, and I like to work on a schedule. And farming has definitely helped me realize that I can't control everything. And I think especially dairy farming is one of those things that is both predictable and unpredictable, which is kind of helpful. I mean, we know that cows like to be on a routine, and our cows are very routined and on a consistent schedule, but we also have to be ready to deal with the unexpected at the same time. So I think that's my short answer for that one, that being flexible is hard for me, but that farming definitely helps me remember that I have to be flexible in order to survive and thrive.
For me, I think it's really good practice to pay attention to small details. And, especially farming livestock, they vary. One thing we hear is, you never have sick sheep. You have healthy sheep and you have dead sheep. And that's kind of it, because they don't tend to make it obvious that they're sick. And so being mindful of small changes in your animals or the weather, whatever, that can clue you into problems or good things that are happening. There's just a lot of small details to pay attention to. And the importance of record keeping, whether we actually do it or not. So that's something we have learned.
Would you say that the skill of thinking ahead is intrinsic or something that can be learned? Because that's something that, as a farmer, you both pointed it out, you also have to be able to think ahead.
I think it can be learned. I mean, I think any quality that that you put effort into, and I think the seasonality, both in terms of crops and like gestational cycles of animals and all that kind of stuff, kind of forces you into thinking ahead, right? If you want to be involved in agriculture, then you're going to have to think about what's happening in 9 months, what's going to happen in the fall, how, like what comes next. So if you're going to be successful, or if you're going to make this work, whether, not success financially necessarily, but if this is something you want to do, then I think it kind of is forced upon you. And I think that over time that thinking ahead kind of goes along with being in this industry.
What were you going to say, Caite?
I don't remember.
Sorry, I couldn't.
I think, no, for me, a lot of it has been having a good partner, because with the way my brain works, specific forward thinking is not a strength for me. But I tend to be a more creative problem solver and to have more flexibility in how I think about things and possibilities that I can consider. And so having someone that I balance out well and that balances me out well has been tremendously important. So there's that. But I do think it's definitely a skill that can be strengthened to look ahead and plan and think things through. But I think it's also good for people who are this is how we've always done it, to work with folks who are less like that, because I think you can also get really stuck in, but this is how we've always done it. So
yeah, I agree. And this question kind of goes into this next question, but I have a question with what you just said, Caite, with your partners and having a partner. Can we just touch on that for a real quick second? Is how do your partners balance you in your farm life, and or maybe they don't balance you, but working together, that could be a whole podcast to itself. Maybe you working with your farm partner, but could you just touch on that? I think Caite brought up a good point, is having that balance, that other person balance you. Like for me, Johnny is my comic relief. I can get a little too into the weeds sometimes, and sometimes I can think too far ahead, and he's quite the opposite of me. So what about Jim and Hugh?
Yeah, for me, oh, sorry. I would
go, Arlene.
Go.
I think one thing I've really struggled with is that we balance each other really well working together, but now that we also have kids and a family, it's more trying to balance the farm and the family, and that's been a really hard transition. But I think, I don't know how people farm by themselves. I mean, maybe they're more emotionally balanced than I am. I wouldn't be successful by myself because I need someone else to balance me out like that. But it's so much, I don't know. Go ahead, Arlene. I'm done. I'm either going to forget what I was going
We'll
to
come
say or
back to
start
you.
crying.
You'll bring it back around, Katie.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Oh.
The relationship side of stuff is complicated, right? So I will say that before we had kids, we weren't farming together. On paper, I was a co-owner, but I was working full time in the city and commuting 2 hours a day. And so until we had children, we had separate lives. You know, we were married and living together, obviously, but I was not on a daily capacity, was not involved in the farm because I was working long days, and then I would get home and we'd hang out in the evening, and that was maybe on weekends I might help here and there, but for the most part I was working shifts and we weren't farming together. And then when we had kids, I was not, because the farm wasn't my job, we didn't try to incorporate me into the farm at that point either. I was on maternity leave, and then we had 3 kids in a few years, and so I was functionally a stay-at-home parent, and he was farming, and we had employees, and my father-in-law was still actively farming, and so I was not actually farming more than in, you know, an occasional capacity. So it wasn't like we were working together. So in a lot of ways, the last couple of years, as I've started to become more involved, as our kids have gotten older, we've kind of maintained some of those roles in terms of I manage the house and the kids for the most part, you know, the emotional labor of kids and family life and house life and all of those things are my department. And, you know, he kind of supports me in that, you know, and often it's, can you do this or can you do that? And on the farm side, that's him, you know, like he's the one doing the emotional labor and the scheduling and the finances. Like he does all the book work still at this point. He's making management decisions and cropping decisions, and he has his own support team in terms of, you know, vet, nutritionist, all those types of people on the farm side. So I'm kind of an employee, or is kind of how I see my role. And at this point, I'm okay with it because I feel like I still have a lot of brain capacity taken up with the other side of our life, with the home and kids side. And that I think he would probably recognize this too. I have limits to how much I want to take on in terms of the farm, and that works for me. And it's not my, like I said, I never wanted to farm as a kid. Not that I don't enjoy it, but it's not my passion. And, you know, like I don't walk into the barn and know every cow or know their genetics or necessarily know, you know, what's happening beyond kind of what my role is on a day-to-day basis. And that works for us. And sometimes I have a bit of, I don't know, I'm not going to say guilt, you know, a bit of imposter syndrome probably, in terms of saying that I'm a farmer when I feel like I'm not a farmer in the sense of making decisions and being a manager. But, you know, it takes everybody to make things work, right? So that's kind of where we are, and that's how we balance each other out in this stage of life. And that might look different in 5 years or 10 years, but that's how it is now.
I feel like for me, I really miss being more active in the farm part of things. So I find myself, especially when we first had kids, really resenting that everybody else got to go out and farm and I was just in the house with the baby, with the screaming baby who, you know, I mean, now that they can talk and they play and they're fun, it's awesome. But newborns are pretty lame, really.
Katie and I disagree on this one, but that's okay. I'm gonna let you
yeah, I'm sorry. I find myself really resentful of not being more active in the day-to-day farm operations. But then when I am asked to participate or asked for my opinion, I find myself really resentful that, like, I work full time. We have 2 little kids. Where the fuck am I going to get the time to do one more thing? And so it's like, I'm mad because I'm not being included. And then I'm mad because they're trying to include me. And like, remembering that I can't, I mean, I can be mad about both, but I can't take it out on anyone else that I'm mad about both, because it feels very much like I'm also at the point in life where if I see everybody else going out and having fun or like going on vacation or whatever, I'm like, well, why don't I ever get to do things like that? And then when I am asked to actually like go on vacation or go out to dinner or whatever, I'm like, it's just one more thing. I'll be out past my bedtime. I have to pack. This is
Yeah,
lame.
I have to get a
And I'm like,
babysitter.
nothing is ever good enough. And like, it is good enough, but it's just one more thing. And then you get resentful that you're resentful. And then it just, yeah, this is why I'm going to be in therapy until I die. Okay, let's just face it. You know, I can overcomplicate anything if I try. So there.
So that question kind of segues into one that was written by someone anonymous. They ask, how did the hosts end up with such amazingly smart, good-looking, funny, witty, and modest husbands?
And the funny part about this question is I could see it coming from either one of our husbands. I know which one submitted it, but I think either if the other had thought about it first, they would have submitted the same question. So we'll leave that as anonymous and we'll just say that they are very lucky people. And yeah, I don't know how they ended up with us either. So we're lucky too, Jim and Hugh. Thanks.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that one, Katie?
Have you told your meeting stories on your podcast, how you met your husbands? Can you sum it up in a few minutes?
I think on our Valentine's episode, we kind of touched on it. Hugh and I met at university. I wasn't yet a student. Like the first time we met, I was visiting my sister and we were at a junior farmer meeting. So we didn't start dating for a couple of years. We were friends first, but yeah, Junior Farmers Association of Ontario, matchmaking since who knows when, whenever they started. My parents actually met. My parents met through Junior Farmers too. So that's kind of a,
oh, wow.
yeah, full circle.
The family.
I had actually had a profile on Farmers Only years and years ago, and it just kept trying to set me up with people I already knew. And I was like, well, this is awkward, like it's only going to match, if I wanted to date these people, I would already be dating them. Thanks. And I had let it lapse for like 5 or 6 years probably. And I was driving home from work one night and I just had this like, had to go on there and see who was on there. Like had never experienced it until that point, that sort of like had to do it. And I was thinking about it this morning that one time I had that feeling and I ended up with a husband. The other 2 times were before we had both kids. Anyway, so logged on, saw this guy, messaged him. He had actually logged on that night to delete his account. He had just told his parents that he was never getting married. He was never having kids. They were just going to have to get over it. He was going to be a bachelor farmer forever. We went on our first date 2 days later. I moved in, I think 3 weeks later. We got engaged 3 months to the day after our first date, and that was 10 years ago. So that's how that works.
Katie and Jim do not mess around once they make a decision.
No, Jim has always just been my person. I never had any butterflies when I met him. The first time I met him felt like, somebody I hadn't seen in a long time, but somebody I'd known my whole life. And honestly, I knew we were going to get married probably by our second date, which was the day after our first date. Jim says it took him a little longer because I think he might have had to wait until the third date, which was 2 days after our first date. Our first date, he said, oh, I'll call you later in the week. Maybe we can go out next week or something. And I think we went out 6 nights out of 7. And yeah, so that's how that went. So don't ignore those feelings unless you have them a lot. If you have them all the time, probably ignore them. But
maybe that's something else. Maybe you've got digestive issues or something.
Yeah, maybe use some more discernment if it's a frequent feeling, but if it's not, maybe you should do it.
I love how the universe speaks in different ways. That is definitely something so synergistic right there. That's a great story. All right, so if you could go back and give a younger version of yourself some helpful advice for how to navigate life, what advice would you give?
That's a hard one because
These questions are getting deep. So
yeah, we're getting into the deep stuff. I go back and forth on whether I want to give myself advice to change what I have done in the past, or, I've ended up where I think I wanted to be and should be. So do I don't want to change necessarily, but I guess going back to what we talked about in terms of looking forward and planning for the future, I think the younger version of me could have lightened up a little and not tried to project so far into the future and maybe just think a little bit more in the moment. So I would tell her to chill out a bit. And yeah, I mean, it's good to think things through, but sometimes you can just live in the moment. So I probably wouldn't listen to the advice because I'm old and I wouldn't think that I had anything to contribute, but that's what I would tell the younger Arlene.
I wish I hadn't been so afraid of everything. I was really timid in my younger days. I'm still fairly cautious about a lot of things.
That's hard for me to picture.
I know, right? Also to save more money.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah. But I mean, yeah, same, Arlene. If I hadn't done the things I did, would I have ended up where I am? Because I am where I'm supposed to be. So maybe it's just as well.
But you'd have more money.
Yeah.
That wouldn't hurt.
That'd be true. Yeah.
Yeah, the stories just continue to unfold here, and I guess I think I could continue to be asking all these different segments of your answers into questions, but I don't want to be here for another 2 hours probably and ask you more questions. But you're giving me some really juicy tidbits here to work with, but I have to refrain myself from making this a really long podcast. So this is the final question, and then you and Arlene are going to ask each other some questions. So, or Caite and Arlene are going to ask each other questions. But this is the last one from a listener: is what makes you proud of yourself this year? I love these.
I'm going to say pushing myself outside of my comfort zone. I mean, even just the original agreeing to do a podcast was a push for me, and trying to connect with people and ask people to do things for me and ask people to talk to me. And I get nervous before every single interview, but pushing beyond that is what has really brought the best parts of what's gone on in this past year, and it has really been the biggest blessing in my life this past year. Well, I mean, besides my kids and my husband, you know what I mean. So yeah, I will say just pushing myself and learning that being outside of my comfort zone can actually bring a lot of good.
I've learned a lot and done a lot of work this year about understanding how my brain works and being able to explain that to other people and giving myself the grace and the space and the time I need to do things in ways that work for me. And I'm really proud of that because it takes a lot to say, this is what I need. This is how I need you to help me. This is what I'm good at, and to really embrace that. And it's such a good feeling. I mean, not only because things are easier, but just to be modeling that for my kids and for other people, that you can just ask for what you need and expect that you will get it because you are a worthwhile person simply because you exist and not because of what you can contribute or do for other people or whatever else. There is no qualification for deserving help, and that's worth a lot. And I'm proud that I pushed Arlene out of her comfort zone.
Yeah, thanks.
You're welcome, Arlene.
I'm also going to say I'm proud of us, Caite, because I feel like we have, not always intentionally, but I feel like we've really figured out how to work together and how to let each other do the things that we're comfortable with and what our strengths are, and that we really do balance each other out, which, I mean, obviously a year ago we wouldn't have known that, but I think we found ways to both be kind to each other and to to really play off of each other's strengths and weaknesses, and that I mean, we all have them, right? So to learn how to work together well and not let it become a problem. We've let it become part of our dynamic.
And I appreciate that you appreciate me just asking random questions. So
I do. It's fun.
I think many people would find that really irritating.
Not at all. I just make the scripts because that's one of my strengths.
No, I'm glad
Wendy.
you do, because I would not be able to do this otherwise. I have to have a place to start from.
Yeah. So Wendy, before we move on to our questions for each other, have you come up with any others that you want to add for us?
No, I've added them along the way. So I do have several others that maybe I might take off podcast, but another
Sure.
time.
Yeah, on the front porch sometime. All right,
Yeah.
so I've got a couple questions for you, Caite. This one is one that I feel like every time we record, I'm like, what? She did that? So my question is, how list from like earliest to now all of the different jobs that you've worked in your life, because even today I heard of one that I didn't know that you had done before, like radio. Okay, so list your occupations if you can
That
remember.
wasn't
all
a
of them.
job though. That was like
Okay, well, volunteer, whatever.
oh God. Do you
Tell-
have a
tell me-
couple hours here,
Tell
Arlene? Or
me the things that you've done.
in no particular order.
Okay.
20 some years of food service restaurant work, all back of house, so cooking, hand pollinating corn, detasseling corn, once dressed up in a 7-foot tall corn costume. That's another story.
See, I knew we were going to come up with stuff I hadn't heard yet.
College radio, a lot of retail customer service shit. I volunteered for a therapeutic recreation program, worked on several different farms, cooked saltwater taffy for the state fair on the road for like 4 or 5 years. I don't even remember. I don't know that there's really
We got to come back to that one sometime.
Yeah, we'll loop back to saltwater taffy later.
No,
and then your current job.
And now I work for a company that's owned by Microsoft. So yeah.
Can you tell us
You went
a
from
little
making saltwater taffy to working for Microsoft?
No, I went
Oh my
from
God.
saltwater taffy to a greenhouse. Well, taffy to a restaurant to a greenhouse to milking cows to baking full time to Microsoft.
Can you tell
So-
us a little bit about what that job is,
Amazing.
or is that secure knowledge? Like, are you allowed to say what you actually do?
Yes. I work for a company called GitHub, which is an online software development platform that allows people to work collaboratively on building open source software. So basically, anything that you use that has software, your cell phone, your computer, like basically anything has at least some of that code was developed on GitHub by different users. My job is keeping the space safe for actual customers doing actual customer software development things. So we get rid of spammers and scammers and bots and people advertising for prostitutes and kids who are underage, because there are federal laws about how old you have to be. So basically
You're
like-
weeding out all the scammy
yeah, we're
stuff.
like bouncers for software development.
Online
keeping
bouncers.
All the
I like
shit
it.
out. Yeah.
And whenever I get one of those weird messages, I will just screen capture it and send it to Caite, be like, "Is this a scam?"
Yeah.
She'll say yes.
And then,
If you're questioning, it's
more
probably
than
a scam.
happy to explain it to folks.
Yeah.
I love it. I love my job. My actual job can occasionally be a bit tedious because it's a lot of going through customer accounts.
Mhm.
But I love
That's why
the
you can
company.
listen to so many podcasts.
Yeah. I love the company I work for. My schedule's super flexible, which is awesome. I love the folks I work with. It's really a pretty ideal job, especially with farming and kids. So
Very cool. Well, I learned something new.
see.
And then my next question is a parenting question. What parenting stage will you not miss when your kids get older?
2 things: them being sticky all the time, everything them coming near being sticky, and them wanting to be carried everywhere, because there's 2 of them And so because they're close in age, the minute one gets carried, the other one wants carried. And so I either make twice as many trips or I have screaming children because they're getting,
Yeah.
they're
And
at
a
about
sore
100.
back.
Yeah, they're at about 100 pounds combined now. So that's a lot to actually carry, especially if you need like open doors or anything.
Mhm.
So
That
that's
just made
getting
me
heavy.
think I can't remember the last time I carried one of my kids. Oh gosh. All
I
right,
know, I
moving
feel like
on.
I should write it in the calendar every time now or something.
Yeah. What are you looking forward to in parenting older kids?
I don't say this to take credit for my children because children are their own people and they do their own things, but they're turning into really kind, thoughtful, creative people. And I'm really excited about how that will develop. And I'm sure they won't develop any more irritating habits or
Oh, definitely not.
unlikable, less likable things, whatever. So I'm sure life will just get easier and easier from here on out. Absolutely. Arlene, what would you be doing if you hadn't done the whole farm husband kids thing?
Ooh.
Yeah. That is a hard one. I do feel like you said earlier about being in some kind of caregiving role as a career. I do feel like there's something about caring for people, whether that's people who are older or postpartum or, I don't necessarily know about nursing necessarily in terms of like the medical side of thing, but I think like the physical care of other humans is something that I would be good at. So I could see myself doing something in that vein. I would probably be doing a whole lot more traveling. I mean, it's still on my list of things I would like to do, but it's definitely more challenging with a farm and 4 kids and all that kind of stuff, and pandemics too. So yeah, lots of travel, maybe some cats, yeah, and some kind of caregiving role.
Sounds pretty wild.
Yeah, look out.
Yeah. So what's
And
the
you're caregiving probably, I don't know how many dairy cows you have, but if you think about all the animals on your farm and your kids and all the critters
Yeah.
and your husband, like
Yeah.
that's a lot of caregiving.
Yeah, I'm doing a lot of that already, so I'd just be getting paid for it.
Yep.
Imagine
Yep.
that.
So Arlene, what's the most ridiculous thing besides the podcast that you've done in
Right.
the last decade?
It's not super ridiculous, but for me, it felt like a big move that I went to Australia with a few friends for my 40th birthday. And that felt like, after more than a decade of parenting, that felt like a huge leap to actually go away from my family with friends for more than a week and do something that was purely for me. Felt like not ridiculous. I mean, it was necessary, and it was great, but it was probably out of my usual realm of things that I would prioritize, and it was fabulous. So that was both ridiculous and great.
All right. So Wendy, when we interviewed you and Johnny, we were still trying out new things. So we asked you a different final question than we use now. If you were going to dominate a category at the county fair, what would it be? And categories can be real or made up.
So this is a good question, but to be honest about something about myself, I'm pretty mediocre at everything.
That's
I
total
can try
bullshit
my hand.
for our listeners. Total bullshit.
No, I can try my hand at everything, but just because I'm curious about a ton of different things, but I'm not that interested in being the best in anything. And I don't know if that's a bad thing or a good thing. Maybe it's something that I'm teaching my own kid, like you don't have to be the best at everything, you don't, it's okay to be curious and to like try all sorts of things, to figure things out. But I guess after going, I used to be a 4-H'er at one time, and I actually paid for my very first year of college with all my 4-H money that I earned from the animals that I showed throughout the years.
That doesn't sound very
Um,
mediocre.
Well, it was it was an accomplishment. That was an accomplishment. But to say that I'm the, I don't think that I could dominate a category at a county fair. But as an adult now and as a farmer, and a marketer, I guess, I become kind of bougie about food and flavor. And so I'd say that my category that I might, win a blue, maybe a purple ribbon would be to grow and raise a really good meat pig. I should say a meat lamb also. It's something that doesn't exist yet at county fairs. I wish that it would. It's all about like how they look, but not how they taste. And so I think that there's just a real disconnect there a little bit. I definitely wouldn't eat those show animals that I see at the fair. I'd be a little afraid, but you are what your food eats. We are what our food eats. And so I see a strong connection there. And so we really make and grow and raise pretty delicious pork and pretty delicious lamb. And we just harvested our very first 100% grass-fed steer. I am not a cattle person. I never grew up raising cattle. His name was Harold. He was a Hereford Dexter cross. And I have to say so myself, Harold is delicious. And grass-fed beef, you both know this, it's an art, it's a craft to learn how to really make a good grass-fed animal taste good and have flavor and texture and everything. And I learned from a lot of different people how to do that. And I was really nervous and scared because that's 2 years, 24 months into an animal. And I've gotten rave reviews from our buyers, just Harold's delicious, and they actually don't mind him calling him Harold. It's actually really good, like, ode to his life and his life on this farm. So that is a category that I think I might be able to win is on the flavor side of meat. How about you? Have you answered this question before?
We have, but I think now that I know about Caite's saltwater taffy experience, that she's definitely going to
that's a good one.
Do well on that one. So I think we'll go ahead into our cussing and discussing segment for the week. This is something we've done on just about every single episode, and yet we seem to always have something to cuss and discuss. We've registered for an online platform called SpeakPipe, where you can leave your cussing and discussing entries for us, and we can play them on the show. So go to speakpipe.com/barnyardlanguage and leave us a voice memo there, or you can always send us an email at barnyardlanguage@gmail.com, and we can read it out for you. So Caite, what have you got to cuss and discuss on the first anniversary of our show?
So Arlene, one of my things I never thought I would do is to live on the same farm property as my in-laws. And they're delightful people. They really are. But one of the things we don't talk about on a family farm where there's like multiple generations of folks all working together, but only, that we're living on the same property as where everyone is coming and going from, is how much traffic there is and how many unexpected people show up because they're here to see my father-in-law, or they're here to, to drop some whatever. And as a country raised introvert, this constant flow of people that I'm not expecting just makes me crazy. I feel like I have to hide from these people.
I hear that.
And I can't be like, I know you work here, but please don't ever come here. Please just find a way to like work from here without being here. Don't let me ever know that you're here, because that is rude and not possible. But there's always people here, and I don't like it.
We live in the country for a reason, right?
Yeah.
Be alone.
I don't live in the country to have people around. Okay. And I know this is our own damn fault because we gave him permission and whatever. We have a neighbor and a friend who both hunt our property, and they both have game cameras out, which is totally fine. It has actually been helpful in a number of situations. But also, I don't live in the country to not be able to pick my nose in my own yard. That's all I'm saying. I feel like if you're going to put cameras out or show up in my yard, you're going to see what you're going to see, and that's on you. Anyway, I've now overshared and really sound like a weirdo. So, Wendy, what do you have to cuss and discuss this week?
So I have the same exact thing that you just said, actually, Caite. The whole drive-in, unexpected drive-in experiences have been on my mind lately, especially with summer and it being close. It's the summer, near the summer solstice now. We're in these really long days, so people just feel it's daylight at 5:30 in the morning. They feel like they could just drive in the yard at 5:30 in the morning or 6 a.m. and knock on your door. And because we're all dairy people, right? I mean, that all farmers wake up at 5 in the morning. Not I, but it's either that or a phone call at 5 or 5:30 now that the daylight is longer. So I have a thing with that. I think when I was on your show, on your podcast, I talked about the whole yoga mat, the yoga seed sales thing. That was that was like a wake up thing that, oh yeah, people do really just drive in. And I just think in this day and age, though, like with our technology that we have, that we can now text people, and give them a heads up that the old fashioned way of like a phone call, but they don't have an answering machine, and so they just drive in. Like, I could see that as like that's something you just did. But today there's just so many options of how to get in touch with someone to let them know that they're going to stop by, that it's just kind of unacceptable if someone drives in at 5 a.m. So,
and I feel like my grandma's generation, like they closed all the curtains at night, and then when they were ready to receive people in the morning, they'd open them back up. But like, I work from home. Am I supposed to just sit here with all the curtains closed all day? Because like, I'm working. I am on the clock for somebody else. If you want me to pay my electric bill and keep feeding my children, I have to work. Like, that's how this functions. And so just because my car's in the yard does not mean I'm available. I am working, but it seems really shitty to say that to people too.
Maybe we need to put signs on the back doors, Caite, like we work from home. Please call or text or something like that.
Yeah.
Well, something really on fire.
Yeah. We actually have issued signs. And I mean, for us, it's biosecurity, but we have a sign on the barn door that has the phone number that says like, do not enter, call this person first. So, I mean, I guess your situations are a little bit different, but ours are part of our, like ProAction, like our quality assurance program actually includes, signage that says like, don't just walk in. Now it's for the barn, but I mean, I could definitely fashion one for the house. At least the way our farm is kind of situated, people tend to go to the barn. Until it's hunting season, people don't really come to the house. And then I hear what you're saying, because it's like every other person, like, you happen to have a farm, can I hunt here? And then I just have to keep saying, this is the phone number for the guy who has hunting rights to our property. It's not me. So talk to him.
I think that's the other thing, is that we get folks who stop here looking for my father-in-law, and my in-laws haven't lived in this house in almost 10 years. They live across the road. People know this. Yeah. But they will drive past the sheds and past my in-laws' house, past all the outbuildings, past my father-in-law's truck, probably actually past my father-in-law, to come to the door to ask where he is. I'm like, so you know where he lives, you have his cell phone number, you know what his truck looks like. Why are you at my back door asking me where he is? Like,
this is not my department.
Solve
your own problems. Anyway, Arlene,
I have one more. I have one more thing to cuss and discuss.
Just go for it.
This is recent, because it's like the time where grasses are growing, pastures are growing, people are haying. And so, Arlene, around here, like, I don't know about in Canada, but people love to hay here. They hay even if they don't even have livestock. They just want to have everything cut and look nice, and everything should just be totally clean and nothing out of order. So our farm is full of pasture right now, and because we do a lot of grazing, we do rotational grazing. So we don't just let the animals out and they're all spread out everywhere, eating what it is that they want. We rotationally graze. So we have areas of our pasture that are really tall, and then areas of our pasture that are shorter. And so I think people drive, and we're on a state highway. And so people drive by, they must pull their hair out or go crazy. Like, I can't not say something, and so they drive in the yard. Some drive in the yard. Some will call, but some drive in the yard. Yeah, hey, I see you have got a lot of forage out there. I've got a lot of cows that can help you take care of that. Like I don't have a plan. Like I just
Right.
am
Yeah.
openly just want forage out there to just, I don't know, like
They think you're just
for a
leaving it.
picture or
Yeah.
something. I'm just leaving it. Yeah, it's just, oh, it's pretty, but
Which would also
people
be
don't
your
really
right as
kind
a
of
property owner. Right? Even if
exactly,
you didn't have a
exactly.
plan, it's still your land. And if that's what you wanted to do with it, you could.
Exactly. And I think many of them know who I am, and so maybe it's because I don't know, I'm a woman and I don't really know what I'm doing or talking about or thinking about, but there is a plan and there is a reason. Stockpile grazing, do people do that? I mean, this is not the year to stockpile graze, but I'm talking about, or not the time of the year, but like in August, when we are stockpile grazing, people want to get that fourth and fifth cutting of hay, and people don't think about, oh, you've got animals, you've got forage, they can get it themselves, instead of having to hay everything and feed it to them and using all that fossil fuels to do that. So that is kind of on my mind this week because it's been hot and the grasses are seeding and the pastures don't look, beautiful. And I don't hay everything. I actually don't hay until August in these pastures. So it's just, I think it annoys others, but it annoys me more that people just think they can drive in and say, hey, I can take care of that for you. So
Right. Like you don't know what you're doing. Thanks so much
like I
for
don't know.
your unsolicited advice.
So how
Arlene, did
about you, Arlene?
yeah.
Oh, so mine is very short this week. And it came up because at the time of recording, we recently had done our episode with the Rural Housewives. And I was listening to the rest of you easily use the word y'all, which I love because it's gender neutral and, like encompasses a lot of different people and you can use it. But as a Canadian, it doesn't sound right. And I feel like I would be like a big faker if I tried to use the word y'all. So I'm not going to use it, which sucks, but I'm just saying it's a cool word. So y'all can keep using it, but it sounds so weird coming out of my mouth.
I think it sounds cute from you, Arlene, and nobody in Northern
Cute.
Iowa uses it either.
Okay.
I'm not
So it's not
entirely
you're the
sure.
exception.
Yeah, I don't know how I picked it up, but yeah, I use it a lot because it is inclusive and it's just better.
Yeah.
So
It's a
I
fun
think
word.
we should really bring it back.
All right. I'll practice
whatever.
then.
All right.
Okay. So I want to thank you so much, Wendy, for joining us here today and celebrating our first anniversary with us. I wish we could actually be together in real life. We could have some cake or champagne or both and get
For
into
real.
all the conversations and all the podcasts. So thank you so much for joining us again and for facilitating our discussion here today.
Yeah, Wendy, thank you for coming back on with us. It's nice to not just have to ask each other questions.
This has been so fun, and I just love both your personalities. You guys do balance each other so well, and Johnny and I are such a fan of your podcast, so please keep it up. We just love this Barnyard Language podcast, and obviously your listeners love you too. So kudos to both of you, and thanks so much for having me interview you. It's been a lot of fun today.
Thank you for joining us today on Barnyard Language. If you enjoy the show, we encourage you to support us by becoming a patron. Go to www.patreon.com/Barnyard Language to make a small monthly donation to help cover the costs of making the show.
Please rate and review the podcast and follow the show so you never miss an episode.
You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok as Barnyard Language, and on Twitter, we are Barnyard Pod. If you'd like to connect with other farming families, you can join our private Barnyard Language Facebook group.
We're always in search of future guests for the podcast. If you or someone you know would like to chat with us, get in touch. We are a proud member of the Positively Farming Media Podcast Network.